Hello students, welcome back. So now I'm going to show you how you can create an endpoint on a local machine and then access that endpoint. So the workflow that will happen would be like this. The client, that will be the user, that is you and me, they will try to access an API endpoint that will be provided to us. And this API endpoint, that would be this right here, is going to try to communicate with your SQLite database. So this API endpoint will try to communicate with this SQLite database that's sitting on the back end. And this database now, after that, is going to send the response back to the client. So the response is going to come back to the client right here. So the first thing you want to do is install the required packages. I'm going to be installing your FastAPI and UVCon. So this will allow you to create API endpoints and also allow you to access those endpoints. Now, in order to install this, you have to open up your command prompt. So let's come over here on your startup menu, type CMD, and you're gonna see this command prompt over here. Click on this, and there you go. You get this screen right here. And on this screen, we're going to type that command, which will be this command right here. So let me increase the size of the screen so you can see that. All right. So I'm going to type Python space -m space pip space install. And it says fast API space uvcon. All right, and let's hit enter. Now, if you already have these packages installed, you're gonna get requirement already satisfied, something like this message like this, just the way just like I'm getting, because I already have this package installed. If you do not have this package installed, this can take anywhere between few seconds to a few minutes. Okay, now we're gonna move on to the next step. Okay, so now this is successfully installed. Let's close this. And you don't have to install, by the way, SQLite. This is already pre-built in your Python, so that's good. Now we will build an API. This particular API, it is responsible for storing users. It will have two endpoints. The first endpoint would be for adding a user. The second endpoint would be to get a user by the ID. And the database that we will use is SQLite. And the name of the database that we would be using is users.db. So this will be right here at this step. And now I'm going to show you the fast API code that is present in a single file. The name of the file is main.py. That's where this code is stored. So let's come to the directory. This is where the file is. Double click on this, and it's going to open up that file, which will be this right here. So let me just walk you through the code real quick. First thing I'm doing, I'm importing my fast API. I'm also importing SQLite 3 database. This is responsible for communicating with your SQLite database. Then I create a app. This is my fast API app. That's how I create that. And this function right here is responsible for creating a connection. In this case, I'm specifying that my connection should be user.db, that right there. Okay, and then after that, I'm creating a table. This function is responsible for creating a table. So over here, first I'm creating a connection, then I'm calling a cursor, and then inside the cursor, I'm executing this statement, create table if not exist, which will be right here. So I'm creating a table if does not exist, and the table I'm creating is called users. Okay, and after that, I'm committing it and I'm closing it. By the way, in this table, I'm just creating only three entries: ID, name, and email. That's it. Okay, and then I call this function create table. This function is responsible for creating the table. Right now, the table is just created, but nothing is inside the table. Okay, then I create my API endpoint. So this right here is just this code from here on onward is for API endpoint. So the first one I'm creating is a root endpoint right here. This one is responsible for serving get request. So whenever user first comes over here through this root endpoint, he's gonna get this message: Fast API plus SQLite API is running, like kind of like a successful message. Then I'm creating this particular post, another endpoint that will be responsible for serving a post request. So in this case, add user. So if a certain user wants to add a particular user, he would have to add the user from this endpoint. So this is a function that's going to be called. In this case, it's going to take the name. It's also going to take this email from the user. So the user is going to supply the name and an email, and based on that, this cursor is going to get executed. It's going to try to insert that record into the database, and then it's going to return this message right here. Message would be, the message would be something like status success, and it's going to type the name of the person that the name has been entered and the email address of the person whose email has been entered. After that, then I create another endpoint right here. This one is responsible for getting the user. Maybe this time the user wants to retrieve or get a user's information. So in this case, the user is supplying the user ID right here. So as soon as the user supplies the user ID, he's going to get user ID based on that. So this is going to be responsible for serving a get request. So this function is going to get executed. In this case, this function, all it's going to do is going to select everything from the user where ID equal to this question mark. The question mark basically refers to this user ID. Whatever the user ID enters over here is going to try to retrieve that record. Okay, and then if everything goes well, he's going to, oops, sorry. If everything goes well, he's going to receive this response: ID, name, and email. And now we are going to run our API server. So in other words, we have to run this API server that would be over here. That's responsible for serving this API endpoint. In other words, your API endpoint is only going to get activated after this server is running. So in order to run the server, you want to open up your terminal, in other words, your command prompt, in the same folder as your main.py file, wherever this main.py file is located. So let's go over there, and this is where my main.py file is located. So I'm going to open up my terminal right here. You see this opened in terminal. You can click on opened in terminal. And now let me just minimize this. And all right, so let me increase the size of screen so this is a little bit viewable. You guys can see this. All right. So all right, there you go. So you can see that I'm basically inside that directory, API setup using FastAPI. So in this directory, I'm going to type this command: python space -m, python space -m, uvcon main app hyphen reload, and that's going to start your server. In other words, this server right here, this one right here, is going to start running, and when this server starts running, your API now will be activated. So that's what this program will do. All right, so let me increase the size of screen so you can see there. So python -m uvcon main dot, okay, everything looks good. Hit enter, and now you're going to see a message. All right, there you go. And you should see something like this: uvcon running on this port right here. So now you want to go to this port. So you can just go to, you can just copy this http colon 127.0.0.1 colon 8000, or you can hit control plus C. Sorry, you can just, shift, or actually, you know what, let's just go to that port. So I'm just going to come over here, and I already have written down over here. So I'm just going to copy this and go to my web browser. And on your web browser, type that right here: 127.0.0.1 colon 8000. And there you go. You're going to see this message. There you go. Message: fast API plus SQLite API is running. And the reason you're able to see this message is because of this code. If you recall, I showed you this right here a minute ago. This was right here. So you see, we just access this root point. We just access the root point, and this is how we got this message: fast API plus SQLite API is running. Okay, so this is good so far. Okay, now moving on to the next step. So next step is, after running the server, now we're going to test this API. We're going to test that using browser. So there is a Swagger user interface available that allows us to test this API. So let's do that. So for that, you have to go to this 127.0.0.1 colon 8000 / docs. Just go over there. So let's come back to that URL again, and just type over here /docs, and that's going to give you this API right here, this user interface. Let me decrease the size of the screen. Okay, so this one allows me to communicate with the API. So this is provided to me by the creators of this fast API in uvcon. So I will be using that. And in this case, I'll be sending a request, and the request I will send would be post and add user, because I want to add a user. And the parameters I'll be supplying would be name equal to Ash, and let's say the email is ash@gmail.com. So let's do that. So come over here, and you're sending a post request. So you have three requests: get, post, and get right here. The reason you're able to see these three post requests, or these requests, is because of the code. If you recall, go back to the code. We created this endpoint, right? This would be this point endpoint. So there is this endpoint. Then we created this endpoint. That is the second one. And then we create another endpoint. That will be the third one. That would be this right here. And that's why you're able to see those three different options over here, because we created these three endpoints. Okay, so you see get, post, and get right here. So let's add a user now. So click on post. We're going to add a user, and scroll down. It's going to ask you name required, but right now it's not activated. You have to click on this try it out button first. So click on try it out, and there you go. Now you add a name. So let's say the name I'm adding is Ash, ASH, and the email I'm adding, let's keep it simple. Let's say ash@gmail.com. Okay, and then hit execute. So when you execute this, when you press this button, what's going to happen is that you will get this response: status success, name Ash, email ash@gmail.com. What just happened was you send the request to the server, and the server through sorry you send the request to the API send it to the server, and the server, it created this email account, it created this user, create this email. In other words, this is exactly what happened right here. So you, from the front end, you sent a request. What type of request you sent? You sent a post request to the API, and API sent that request to the SQLite database, and it created that record over there. And then you got the response back. The response that you got back was this right here. That would be this response. You see the response body? This is the response you got from the server. That means everything worked fine. All right, now let's move on to the next step. So we are able to successfully create a record over there. So we sent a request to the API. API went to this SQLite database, and it inserted a record inside, and it gave a response. This is good. Now next step. So this is the response we got. Okay, this is good. Then moving on to the next step, that would be right here. Now we're going to test using a browser. So this time we are going to be test get response. Okay, so we're going to be sending a get request, and we're going to try to send this request to the API, and we're going to try to get an information about a certain user now. So let's do that. So in this case, the request I'll be using is get, and this is the one I'll be using. So let's go back to our browser again, and this is the one, and you're going to see this get right here. Okay, not this one. Let me just collapse this, and there you go, this one, get right here. So click on this, and there you go, and click on try it out, and let's hit a enter ID. Now in this case, ID is going to say 1 because there's only one person, so I'm going to hit enter 1. So now click on execute, and there you go, and now you're going to see a response. There you go, ID 1, name Ash, email ash@gmail.com. Okay, now let me explain you what just happened. So coming back to this picture right here. So you as a user, there is a front end, you sent a request to the API. You sent get request to the API, and you asked it, hey, say, get me the user with the ID 1. So API, it went to the SQLite database, and from the SQLite database, it retrieved that information. And this is exactly what happened. And this is how, when you got the response back, the response that you got was this right here: ID equal to 1, name equal to Ash, email equal to ash@gmail.com. What if you enter something that's not exist over there? Let's say I enter some ID 999. And let's see what it does. Execute and come down over here. And now you're going to see user not found. Regardless, even if you enter something wrong, your SQLite database, as a matter of fact, your API is able to handle those invalid requests too, is able to send you something back more meaningful. And now you can also communicate to the API using command line. So let's do a different way. This time I'm going to run a program called client.py. That's from this end. This is a Python program that's going to run, and it's going to try to communicate with the API using Python. So let's do that. So in order for that to work, you have to make sure that you have request library installed. So let's go ahead and install that. Let's just come over. Actually, not over here. Let's not kill this process. We're going to keep that process running. Go back to your command prompt again, type cmd, and you're going to see this command prompt. Open that up, and let me move this guy down here so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, let me increase the size of screen, and I'm going to type this command: python space -m space. I'm typing this command, this whole command right here, space pip space install. Install, and in this case, requests, requests. Make sure it's S, okay? It's a plural, and hit enter. If you already have this request installed, you're gonna get a message: requirement already satisfied. If you do not have this installed, it can take anywhere between few seconds to a few minutes to get it installed. Okay, after this is successfully installed, now we're gonna run this particular command. We're gonna run that program, python m-client.py. Now let me show you the code first. So this is the code. It's present inside this library right here. This one right here, client.py. So let me open this file up and explain you real quick what it does, this code. So in this case, first I'm doing is importing my request library. Then this is my URL 127.0.001:8000 because that's where my FastAPI is serving, is running. And this is my add user URL. This is the URL that is used for adding a user. And this is my parameters. This is the parameter that I'll be supplying. This is actually the same thing that your Swagger UI supplies. Okay, and then I'm giving some response over here. So first I'm sending a post request right here. This post request is responsible for sending this data. It's going to send name, it's going to send email to this add user URL. So once it sends this parameter to this particular URL, this user gets added by the API automatically. And then at the end, you're going to see this message, add user response, status code, whatever the status code is in response. So whatever response you got from the server, you're going to see this message over here. Okay, and then the next step, the next piece of code that's going to execute would be this right here. Now it's going to try to, after it has added the user, now it's going to try to get that user. So it's going to try to get the user one. This is that user one, and it's going to supply this base URL. My base URL is this right here. Where is my base URL? This one right here. So it's giving the base URL, and then you're going to get a response. You're going to send this request through get. It's going to send a get request in order to get the user information, and then at the end, it's going to print out the status code. Also, it's going to print out the response. So let's run this program. So go back to your folder right here. You make sure you go open up this file. So go back to that folder. Open up your terminal in that folder, and let's click on that. There you go. And just come down here. Let me minimize this, and I'm gonna run this program now. So the way I'm gonna run it is, let me just increase the size of the screen so you can see. All right, and I'm gonna run this code, which is right here. Python space -m space client py. So this particular code is responsible for executing, for running this client program right here. So I'm going to say Python space -m space client. All right, and hit enter. And let me increase the size of the screen so you can see that. All right, and you go. All right, and let's hit enter and wait for it. And there you go. Now you can see that you got, first it sent a post request, and post request, the message it got from the server is status success, name ash, email this. So it created this record right here. So the first step, if you recall, I created an email and that created successfully. The second step was I was trying to retrieve that information now. And I was able to retrieve that information from the server. So you can see that everything is working fine. And so what just happened? Let me just give you a rundown real quick. So first step, this particular program, the first thing it did is sent a post request to add a user. So over here, I ran this client.py that sends a request to the API that, hey, I want you to create a user. And what type of request it sent? It sent a post request. So API communicated with the database, it created a user, and then it sent a response back. And the response that I got was this right here. This one right here, status success, name ash, email this. All right. Next step was, then I sent a get request to retrieve a user by the ID. So that was this right here. So in this case, this step right here. So I sent a get request. Next thing, this is the next thing I did. So this step was responsible for creating a user using post, and then after that, I'm sending a get request to get an ID of a certain user, and then I'm getting a response from the server. And the response I got was this right here. Status code is 200, very good. ID 1, name ash, email this right here. So coming back to this right here. So over here, I sent a get request. It went to the API. API sent it to the database. Database, performed whatever it needs to do. Then it sent the request back, or sorry, response back to the user.